And for more on Hiroshima, let's cross live to Washington, D.C., where RT's Aliona Minkowski has got a guest for us. Hello to you, Aliona. So, introduce your guest, please.
I will. Well, first, let me introduce, of course, when the U.S. dropped bombs on both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those are events the world will never forget. And 64 years later, those are the only times when such actions were taken. So right now, when countries such as Russia and the U.S. are actively pursuing reducing their arsenals, there are still others that are putting massive funds and time into getting their name on that nuclear powers list. So we're going to discuss, what does that mean? Where does that put the world? Have we really learned any lessons, or will many more generations live with the threat of nuclear terror? And here to discuss that with me is Philip Wheaton. He's an author, historian, and Episcopal priest. Thank you for joining us. Now, first, I want to go back to 1945, when they actually dropped those bombs. Do you think that it was a military necessity, or did they just want to experiment and see what they could do with this new weapon?
No, I think the war was over. Midway basically ruined the Japanese Navy. Russia had destroyed most of the army in Manchuria. They had lost all access to their petroleum sources in terms of keeping their airplanes going. And they had totally demolished all of the cities except for 3 or 4 of them in Japan with carpet bombing. So the war was over. It was a question of negotiation about which day and what conditions were, but the war was over. So this was a special.
So there was
the dropping of the bombs had other motivations and not the ending of the war.
And what kind of motivations? And also, do you think that they really had an idea of what kind of destruction it would cause, what the consequences would be?
Yes, Lona, all of the officials did, all of the people in the White House did, all of the atomic scientists did, and many of the people who were working on the side projects of war. The Pentagon knew, probably the American people, very, very little.
So if the American people didn't know, what is it that they were told about what this bomb would do?
Oh, well, Truman said that this would save 250,000 troops that would be otherwise killed, and that's not true at all. I mean, the emperor had already requested peace, and they were just arguing about the terms, and so they had to move very fast. They had to drop the bomb in order to use that justification that if we don't drop the bomb, they won't surrender.
So they wanted to fit it in that window before the Japanese
actually surrendered. And even finishing the perfectioning of the atomic bomb, they were rushing because they knew that their timeline was very short.
And the way they did it was without any type of warning. And who were most of the victims? A lot of civilians.
Yes, these are true. And the atomic scientists from Europe had made it very clear, including to FDR, not ever to drop this on a populated area, but out in the countryside so that people could see the effect. But FDR and Truman both totally disregarded that agreement with the scientists. It's a secret that most Americans don't know. And so they simply went ahead with it because they really wanted to see the effects on both human beings, which they never treated thereafter. There was no medical treatment given, even though they had plenty of, facilities, doctors and nurses and so forth. They never treated any of those victims. They were it was a laboratory experiment, and they wanted to see the physical destruction of the buildings.
Now that they've seen the physical destruction, now that the whole world knows the type of results that dropping an atomic bomb can have, why do you think that other countries are still pursuing trying to have nuclear weapons? Haven't they learned any lesson?
I think at the psychological level, it's the whole drive for power. And even with smaller nations like Iran and North Korea and so forth, I think it's a symbol of power, and they want that. And it's true with corporate leaders. It's true with the Pentagon. It's true with many, many people who want and seek power. And this is a symbol. This is the highest symbol of that kind of power. And in fact, most of the people who were speaking yesterday who have been to Japan or are from Japan were saying they have no idea what they're dealing with. They think they can control it, but this thing is at any moment 1 or 2 bombs drop, and we're into a nuclear holocaust that will destroy the world. And it's very, very delicate kind of peace that we have just having the bombs.
Definitely. But what about now Russia and the U.S. both pledging to reduce their nuclear arsenals? There are movements like Global Zero that want to, reduce it completely to zero. Do you think we'll ever really have a nuclear-free world? Will these examples actually work?
You have to understand that even though they have already reduced their arsenal to a certain degree, many of those bombs are 10 times more powerful than the original atomic bombs. They have been stepped up by various degrees, and so they're sitting on more power than they've ever had before.
Absolutely.
And remember that those 2 cities each had 1 plane and 1 bomb.
I have to cut you off. I'm sorry, but
yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. And 64 years later, after these bombs, we're obviously still discussing nuclear power in the world and the threat it poses. Thanks, and back to you over in Moscow.
All right, Eliona. Yes, indeed.